December 11th. It is 9 a.m. All council members are present, town manager, town attorney, town clerk. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, our first item for discussion today is the R2P2. It's the final report presentation. We have Ellie Baker, Drew Parker, John Ford, and Margaret Federal
Emergency Management Agency. Our project lead from EPA is with us today by phone to introduce the Recovery and Resiliency Partnership Program. So I'm pleased to turn it over to Drew Parker from EPA Region 4, who is calling in from his car at the moment.
Hi, Drew.
Maybe.
Oh,
Maybe not. We're only every 5 minutes.
Drew, we're having trouble. Can't hear you. All right, I'm going to jump in on Drew's behalf. I apologize for that. Drew is now working in North Carolina on hurricane recovery, so he may be in the hills somewhere. So a little bit about the Recovery and Resiliency Partnership Project. It's a program that provides free technical assistance to communities impacted by a major disaster declaration. So this work that we've been doing came after Hurricane Ian back in September of 2022. And the program's goal is really to develop a set of community-driven conceptual designs that reflects a participating community's vision for long-term recovery and are poised to leverage federal, state, and nonprofit funding resources for implementation. So really what this work tries to do is get the community after a hurricane, and while you're trying to get moving and recover after a hurricane, EPA is trying to help you to develop projects that you can actually move forward and take to the next level of applying for grant funding or finding other funding and financing options following a disaster. So in this case, EPA, with funding from FEMA, worked with 3 participating communities. So we worked at the same time with Fort Myers Beach, City of Sanibel, and the City of Fort Myers. As you know, all 3 of these communities were severely impacted by Hurricane Ian. And while we didn't work, together with each of the communities, we worked individually with each community within the region where you all are located, and that made it, similar issues across the 3 communities, and then also gives you the opportunity to share information with each of those communities as you move forward. So with that, you'll also be hearing from members of our team today, which you can see here on the screen. Our team is comprised of my firm, the Horsley Witten Group, which is a planning, engineering, and science firm specializing in sustainable design and resilience. Dover Cole & Partners, a town planning and urban design firm, and Spikowski Planning Associates, which is a community planning firm based in Fort Myers. So together, we as a team were contracted by EPA to provide the technical assistance for hurricane recovery and resilience within the realm of resilient community design. So this included topics such as nature-based solutions, green infrastructure, and community connectivity. My colleagues with me today are John Ford, who you see here from Horsley Witten, and Margaret Flippen from Dover Cole, as well as Bill Spikowski, who's there in the room with you, as you know. So I also would like to acknowledge the many federal and state partners that support the work under this program in Fort Myers Beach, as well as other locations. So a little bit about the R2P2 is the what we're calling this recovery and resilience partnership project. So that's the R2P2. This technical assistance emerged in response to the damage incurred from Hurricane Ian in September 2022. So EPA and FEMA initiated discussions with the town officials and staff back in early 2023 to identify, actually earlier than that, I think just after the hurricane occurred, to identify sort of potential projects where our technical assistance could be of use to the community. And this is kind of a big, wide open question, right? How can we be of use if you all are trying to recover from a hurricane? So there was a list of initial ideas that was identified, and then we worked with the community and with EPA and FEMA to explore those initial ideas, and we came down and did a visit to Fort Myers Beach back in March of 2023. March of 2024, to meet with local staff, officials, and other key stakeholders, and visit a whole host of the potential project sites to better understand sort of the issues at hand, what are the goals, what are the things that you all are struggling with and could use some assistance with. So following that visit, we worked with the town to better understand some of the goals that the town was interested in pursuing and to narrow down the list of projects and focus areas for our work. And that's what you'll be hearing about today, those focus areas. So these are connectivity throughout the island, Newton Beach Park, and the Times Square and Old San Carlos Boulevard. So you can see these areas on the map. These pages, much of what you're going to be seeing in our presentation today is from the final report, which I know you have access to or a copy of in your package today. It's also available online. So these are the areas. We looked at Old San Carlos Boulevard, Times Square, Newton Beach Park, and then just sort of overall island-wide connectivity. We also tried to articulate the goals in the report, as you see here on the screen, to guide our work. So these goals, to put it succinctly, are how can we help to reduce traffic, improve connectivity, and help build and support community bonds, and just generally make it easier for folks to get to the places they want to get to around the island. Our report presents a connectivity map that identifies promising mobility ideas for the town's future, and you'll be hearing more about that from John. How can we support the town in maintaining public access to the beach in places like Newton Beach Park that are so beloved and well used by the town residents? Our report presents design ideas for a post-Ian Newton Beach Park, and again, you'll hear a little bit more about that from John. And then, as you well know, Hurricane Ian really devastated the Times Square area of town, and our report explores some alternative futures for the next iteration of Times Square in an effort to assist Fort Myers Beach in sort of bouncing back from the damage of Hurricane Ian, while also adapting to change and reducing risk from future hazards. This is the very definition of a more resilient future. So I also just want to take a minute to tell you a little bit about some of the public engagement or community engagement that we did during this project over the past year. We created a variety of opportunities for public engagement and input. And in June of this year, we made a more extended visit to Fort Myers Beach, during which we were graciously allowed to set up shop right there where you all are in the interim town hall. We hosted a public community input session on June 12th with a full house. And then we hosted an open studio for 2 full days following that. We had various discussions during that open studio with interested stakeholders on each of the projects under consideration, and then also were available to the public for whatever questions or inquiries they might have. We also maintained a project website noted here on the top left for our work in Fort Myers Beach. The website is www.coastalflr2p2.com. And on that website, we hosted a public engagement survey for 3 weeks following the design workshop to gather feedback about what people heard and learned at the design workshop and other ideas that folks had. So our report contains an attachment with all of the survey results for those who are interested in looking into that. So I am now going to turn the mic over to my colleague John Ford, who's a civil engineer with Worsley Witten Group, to begin to present our work in each of the focus areas.
Okay, thank you, Ellie, and good morning, everyone. So the first thing that I'll dive into is island-wide connectivity. This was really interesting in all of the communities that we worked in. To take connectivity as kind of an overarching theme of our work to make sure we understood how folks get around. We have specific resiliency sites within the communities, but how are they all connected? And especially in a place like Fort Myers Beach that does struggle and has struggled for a while with the challenges of vehicular congestion and parking as challenges both to safety, moving around on the island, and economic development, and just the brain damage of sitting in traffic, which we know you've been struggling with for a long time. So we're not starting from scratch here in Fort Myers Beach. We knew the goals in reviewing your previous work and previous plans done by the town, and also what we heard loud and clear from the community surveys and from the community when we were there, and we experienced firsthand when we were there. Everything that can be done to reduce vehicular trips in Fort Myers Beach within the community and getting back and forth to the island can be and should be in the short, medium, and long term part of the challenge, overcoming the challenge to congestion. And so that's what we really focus on, reducing the need of a car, improving public transit, finding ways to get around by pedestrian and bicycle, not just to get around, but to get around comfortably and safely, and optimizing parking, enhancing traffic calming, placemaking, and shade. Those were our goals. Those are your goals, and you heard them loud and clear. And so if you move ahead one, we're really building on past work, including the town's pedestrian and bicycle master plan. We know this for decades has been this network of hidden paths that the community has been trying to find ways to get back and forth off of Estero. And the first thing we did was really refresh that island-wide map to try to be as useful as we could to the community and leaving behind an updated island-wide connectivity plan. So that's in the report. Can't see that here. I'll zoom in on a few things. That really, we had three key ideas, focus areas. We refreshed the island-wide map and kind of zoomed in on a few of the gaps and opportunities that we saw. So existing, planned, and possible. There's a lot in the works. What can we focus on? So the first thing being mobility improvements. So finding ways to get off of Estero and really specifically looking at Times Square to Red Coconut as a key link. Since the Estero shared bike lanes and sidewalks continue from Red Coconut south. The second was the possibility for a water taxi or ferry. We heard that from the community, and the idea that we could identify in the connectivity plan logical route for that water taxi or ferry locations where there could be stops that align with key places within Fort Myers Beach. And then also making sure to connect that if you arrive on the ferry or water taxi, that pedestrian bike network links up with those locations to get back and forth. And again, finding ways to get back and forth off of Estero as much as possible. The third thing was looking maybe more long-term at Estero Boulevard improvements. We know in the life of the island is a relatively recent improvement to add the on-street bike lanes, and we looked at those as a great way to allocate pavement to bicycle users, but not the most comfortable way to get back and forth, especially for those that maybe aren't as super confident riding their bike around town. Is one thing we definitely heard from the community. So we wanted to leave behind a couple alternatives that if future funding becomes available, that the Sun Trail network as it moves through Fort Myers Beach could be better, safer, more comfortable for all users. So leaving a few aspirational ways to move forward with a better Estero Boulevard for Fed Bike. And last but not least, kind of like a bonus idea we had, potential for mobility improvements within the Times Square area. That Crescent, 3rd, and 5th Streets, they're marked as bike boulevards now. Kind of as the bridge lands and you find your way into Times Square. So bike boulevards being very slow speed streets where bicycle traffic is shared. There's an opportunity to rethink some of those streets if they become a network of one ways to allocate for specific dedicated ped bike movement, if that's desired. So we have a couple of sketches and diagrams in the plan for that. Times Square to Red Coconut being the first key. I think folks there know this well, and we just wanted to make sure we are specific and memorialize the opportunity to get back and forth from Times Square to Red Coconut, since that's the most crunched Estero Boulevard right-of-way section. There's not really room for dedicated bike infrastructure or wider sidewalks in the stretch. From Red Coconut South, the right-of-way gets wider, there are the bike lanes. So identifying a way for a beach trail, which I believe the community has been working on, is an alternative to get back and forth from Estero along the beach, back up through and crossing Estero through the town hall complex, and then making sure that the link continues through the Red Coconut site with a separated at least 10, maybe even 12-foot wide shared use path through whatever the Red Coconut may be in the future. So there were specific meetings when we were there, making sure we were discussing that and how that can work through and be a benefit not just to the community, but also to the Red Coconut site redevelopment as a value add. These are some of the cross sections looking at the future of Estero Boulevard. We really saw that there was space. The top left cross section is the existing cross section. You can see the bike lanes on either side. That there's a possibility, even without moving curves, or maybe minimal curb improvement on one side, to consolidate those two bike lanes into a shared trail on one side that can be both horizontally and vertically separated, meaning it can be at sidewalk level and preferably buffered from moving cars with vegetation and trees, and start to get a greener and safer, more comfortable trail, which I think could be really amazing for the community, not just for mobility, but also for adding green and kind of a destination way to get back and forth that to enjoy. There are a couple more sections that maybe are a little more adding a green buffer, widening or sidewalks on different sides of the streets, a bunch of different alternatives that we looked at that all have their relative pros and cons. So moving on to Newton Beach Park. We heard loud and clear from the community, Newton Beach Park is a very well-loved place, a spot on the island with a lot of history and the Newtons there, and just devastating, especially devastating to the community to see that wiped away. And now that the community's been moving on and no longer needing that spot for recovery operations like it had been needed in the past, and finding funding to move forward and kind of rebuild Newton Beach Park consistent with what the community is envisioning now. We had the opportunity to sit down at a table. Our landscape architect, Alan Biggert, had a roll of trace paper and markers, and this is the beauty of working like this and being there with you folks to sketch out alternatives for the future with everyone in the room, and making sure it's connected to the history of place, what the community envisions should go back there, and also making sure to be connected to the grant opportunities that have requirements for things like educational signage. So the current site, we drew up a couple of kind of sketch alternatives that are on the next slide, of different ways to kind of, as a bubble diagram, almost arrange the pieces in different ways and see how they fit together, and the pros and cons of various alternatives, and then move from that to consensus plan. And so that plan is in the report with some background. A couple of key things that I'll mention about the plan. There's a network of a path loop. You can see kind of on plan right to the south. Estero is to the top of the page here, and the beach to the bottom of the page. There's that kind of required and also very desirable walking path loop through the site, where we can have the educational signage and enough of kind of a native plant green restoration as we possibly can. And the cool thing that does, it kind of lays out the opportunity for flexible and almost modular event, meeting, and hangout spaces. The big red box in the middle is an open air pavilion. It could have small events. There's an opportunity for another small event space kind of on the other side of the path, and the possibility for bigger events that those two could be combined into be one larger space. We show swings, which we heard a lot from the community, and the ability to look out on the beach. We kept the parking on the north side and wanted to make sure that we heard ADA accessibility to the beach, and one of the few places where folks that have a harder time getting around can get really close to the beach. We wanted to make sure to preserve that, and also the opportunity that maybe half of that parking closer to the beach is of a different surface, pavers or stone dust or something that could be another event space, or even that whole parking area can still be used if needed in recovery from future events. That's the summary. We have a sketch here that our landscape architect, Alan Bigger, did. This is looking kind of from above Estero towards the beach of what that might look and feel like. You can see the temporary restroom facility there, and making sure we have a spot for that on the right of the drawing. With that, I will turn it over to Margaret Flippen with Grover Cole.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for having us join your meeting this morning. We appreciate your time, and we hope that you've all had a chance to take a closer look at the document and hope that this overview is helpful. I'll be kind of going over the concepts for Old St. Carlos Boulevard and Times Square. And as John and Ellie have both mentioned this morning, I think one of the main components of this planning process of R2P2 has really been building on existing plans and policies within the town. So I feel like what we were able to work interactively with you all on is sort of a complement to existing plans and policies that you all have had in the works for a long time. And part of that with Old St. Carlos Boulevard, it truly represents the town's commitment to placemaking. And it's becoming, and it has been, the downtown heart of the island with a long history, with the investment in Bayside Veterans Park. It really shows the community commitment to this area, as well as the public, how encouraging it can be when public improvements and private investment work together. When the town incorporated, the town made a commitment to Old St. Carlos Boulevard, and by doing so, making it a signature public space, and in effect extending, making it an extension of Times Square. And so that really touches on a beach to bay connection, with wide sidewalks, street trees, parallel parking. And in doing so, when the town incorporated, they also changed the land development regulations for Old St. Carlos Boulevard to allow more buildings right up to the street. And you can see the benefit of that town policy made, 25 plus years ago, and what those built results are like. And so that's a wonderful example of town leadership and drawing lines on a map and really creating that placemaking that's a benefit to everyone in the community. And so as recovery and rebuilding continues, there's a lot of opportunities for continued improvements and investment along Old St. Carlos Boulevard. Can skip ahead a little bit. Yeah, Bayside Veterans Park. We were honored to be a part of the story of Old St. Carlos Boulevard, working with the town in 1999 and beyond. And so just sort of looking back once again, some of the plans and policies that are in place and that really help to shape the evolution of Old St. Carlos. So in the report, you'll see for each of these study areas, we've outlined just a series of challenges as well as what we heard. And what you'll see is we were really looking at some of the regulatory actions that are necessary in these areas. And the thing about Old St. Carlos is it's located just outside of the most restrictive FEMA zone. And that's important because it helps to allow some expanded redevelopment options that may not be possible in some of the more beachfront properties. The code currently allows for dry flood proofing, which is also a great benefit because, and you've seen that in some of your existing buildings along Old St. Carlos, because you can, the buildings do not have to be elevated, but you can do dry flood flood proofing on the ground floor. And so the benefit of continuing to invest in Old San Carlos is that the land development codes and the commercial design standards are already in place that help to define the building placement, and there's opportunities to encourage to expand upon the pedestrian friendly streetscape and do some additional enhancements. And so through our work through the R2P2 planning process, we were able to create a change over time sequence of what that continued town and private investment along the Old San Carlos Boulevard district would look like, and really having the opportunity to sort of expand that reminiscent energy and experience of Times Square and further that beach to bay connection along Old San Carlos. And so one possibility in the near term is the continued public improvement with regards to street lights, street trees, helping to restore the shade and opportunities that really encourage more of that pedestrian activity. Looking at the private investment, so being able to build taller buildings right up to the street, the current regulations, looking at the FEMA and the town and the building code regulations, they do allow up to 2 stories. And so that's encouraging, especially with the dry flood proofing as well. And then the opportunity to really capture the essence of the space and make it more sort of the heart of the community with festive street murals or just sort of public art and ways to really showcase that this is an important place in the history of Fort Myers Beach. Times Square was a main topic of conversation during our R2P2 planning work, and you know, the long history of Times Square as well as the reminiscent feeling and overall connection to the space with the public plaza as well as the buildings with restaurants and shop fronts filling out onto the plaza. And unfortunately, after a storm, many of these buildings are no longer there. And even from your storms this past fall, you know, I was watching online and on Facebook, and when I saw the clock being removed, you know, you all have definitely been through quite a long experience of storms and recovery. And I was glad to see that the clock was coming back, as well as the Points had a Christmas tree. And so that really says a lot about Times Square as really being part of the community and a showcase of community pride. Times Square is interesting with the public plaza as well as the private properties. And so what we're doing, understanding that Times Square and the rebuilding of Times Square is really at the forefront of many of the community conversations. And so what we were doing was looking at the challenges, just like we did in the other areas with regards to the regulations and the FEMA regulations, the building code regulations, and looking at options to illustrate a wide range of futures for Times Square. And we were really diving into what could be possible, understanding that many of these properties, small parcels that we need to work together as they are private property. And these are all just conceptual drawings. These were just us sort of testing scenarios. These are not necessarily solid recommendations of what could be. But we're working with the community as well as the property owners, having some very beneficial conversations to understand the direction of the future of Times Square. And some of the main things that we heard from the community was maintaining the architectural character, the traditional beach character of the Times Square area. And so what we've tried to do is sort of illustrate what that could look like with regards to scale and massing and building heights. Also a prioritization and connections views to the water, and looking at, once again, the building heights. And just, we were very encouraged, but the essential question is, can the popular appeal of the former Times Square be recreated at this prime location? So that was sort of the challenge that we were looking at. So once again, some of the challenges, the federal floodplain regulations, the high cost of redevelopment, and then the fact that many of the property of Times Square is seaward of the state's 1991 coastal construction control line. And that's very important because this is definitely designated as a highly vulnerable location. And so that's definitely something to take into consideration as rebuilding continues. So and Bill can share some more with regards to this as well, but we were looking at those development parameters of what's required in the code. And in the Fort Myers Beach Comp Plan Land Development Code, it's 1 story above flood. But I believe, Bill, has that been changed now?
Yes, it has.
Yes.
Mhm.
Okay. And so then looking as well at the uses, the mix of uses, and that there are no parking requirements, which is a very good thing for this area. We also did some diagrams looking at the height, and we thought this was very important to look at and as yourselves as town leaders to consider as development decisions are being made as we move forward. But looking at the scale of the original Times Square, which is the top image that you see there, before Hurricane Ian, pretty low slung buildings. And then looking at we've done a diagram in the middle there that shows one of our options, which is more transforming the space into park space. And then the last is looking at the bottom diagram shows what would be possible by building under the new regulations. And you'll see the main component there is the elevation of the buildings moving up above the street level. So we have a range of options. These are all just concept drawings to sort of test the various scenarios based on the feedback that we heard from the community and the property owners in the town. And so we looked at a range from what that would look like for Times Square to have a park on the beachfront or some development. Most of these concepts, 1, 2, 3, and 4, continue to have that public plaza at Times Square. The 5th option looks at a consolidated development where the property owners work together. So in the report document, we've outlined these, once again, just sort of going through sort of the pros and cons of each and sort of explaining these design concepts. So the first one, looking at the park on the beachfront, and then this one does include some temporary structures that would be movable. And so that's an opportunity to continue to get some businesses in this area in the near term until brick and mortar can continue. This one also has more the park on the beachfront, but as well as the actual new buildings and new development coming in built to the standards that are required for this vulnerable area. Also, this one changes it up a little bit with what it would look like if the buildings were placed on the beachward side and the park or community space was on the landward side of Times Square. And then this is more of more development that would be both on the beach and the landward side of Times Square. But you can see the scale of this is very different from what was originally the original character of Times Square. And then option 5, as I mentioned, is more of this where the property owners would work together and consolidate parcels to create one cohesive and complete development. And in this scenario, the Times Square public space would be elevated more like a boardwalk or walkway incorporated in part of the development. So once again, these are all just scenarios, just testing options, just looking at what the regulations are requiring and what that would look like. So a big part of what we were hoping to do through the R2P2 planning process is to help you all as public leaders to visualize change and to be able to further demonstrate what these changes could possibly look like, more the scale and the massing of the buildings if the Times Square is to be rebuilt and as previously decided in the location. So we also, in the report, you'll see comparing options. And so these were just sort of some things, some feedback that we got from the town with regards to it'd be really helpful to have some ways to evaluate some of these options and scenarios. And so these were some of the criteria that we developed throughout this planning process, similar to the historic Times Square. Again, resilience, public accessibility, and then the amount of food and retail destinations on the property as well. So these are just sort of some of the things that, depending on what is a priority, you'll see that option 1 is the most resilient option with the park on the beachfront side, and then more of the movable structures on the Times Square landward side of the Times Square Plaza. So it's just an option to sort of think through the options and look at how you could possibly compare them and some of those scenarios and sort of attainable measures you can look at to compare the different options, especially as development moves forward.
Thank you, Margaret. Sorry, I was trying to find my unmute button. Our report also provides some high-level implementation actions for each of these focus areas to help guide the town on sort of your potential next steps. So there's a couple of pages of a table in the final report, and we've tried to identify who in the town might take the lead to push these various items forward and in what time frame and order of operations they could potentially be undertaken. So these are pretty intuitive and simple next steps. But the idea here is for each of these projects to kind of guide you on what you need to do over there, or what you could do if you wanted to pursue any of these over the next couple of years. So for example, the island-wide mobility and connections, John presented a lot of different elements to improving connectivity. So the first task would be sort of taking those and having further discussion to prioritize which of those elements you'd like to pursue first, assemble funding, select a contractor, etc. For Newton Beach Park, that plan, I think, is, represents a consensus from what we understood down there. So maybe that one may be closer to happening. I believe there is actually some funding in place to move that forward to some degree. And then, what we've presented is essentially a bubble diagram, as John noted. I mean, some beautiful pictures, but there's some engineering design that would need to happen before you can select a contractor and construct that. Times Square, I would say on this, I mean, there are a lot of elements to Times Square, obviously, in San Carlos Boulevard. And I just want to point out, I think the biggest next step that we've talked about and that we've heard a lot about is really maintaining and continuing communication around, public engagement, what the public wants to see, and also engaging openly with the landowners to try to continue to understand what's possible, what's allowed there, and what makes economic sense there. So there's just ongoing discussions clearly that need to happen there, and maintaining those open communications is really important. So Old San Carlos Boulevard, again, you saw some ideas from Margaret about things like replacing lighting, shade opportunities, public art. And so each of those things can be undertaken, sort of under a master plan idea, but individually. So, thinking about who might lead those, this could be a variety of different folks: public works, town manager. You'll see the town manager shows up a lot in this as a project lead, but really somebody needs to kind of say, yes, we're going to pursue this, and then perhaps delegate. But this is, as I said, a very high level sort of implementation framework for taking any of these projects forward. But then there's really the next steps. And I don't actually have a full detailed slide here for next steps because this is where you all come in. So we were very honored to be able to do this work with the community, and we really enjoyed it. And what we really hope is that we provided you with a good jumping off point to pursue sort of some of these ideas, facilitate the ongoing communication that hopefully we've set the stage for, and to make some decisions around, what are the different elements to improve resiliency in Fort Myers Beach. So we thank you very much for the opportunity to work with you and the opportunity to present our report to you. And as I said at the beginning, we're happy to stay on and answer whatever questions you may have. I also just want to reiterate that the report is, and information about our process and throughout this whole project is all available on the website, as I mentioned, but it's coastalflr2p2.com. So with that, I will stop sharing so that we can see each other, and we'd be happy to answer questions. And Bill Spikowski is also in the room there if that helps to, if he can help facilitate any Q&A, that would be great too.
All right. Thank you, Ellie, and then Drew and Jan, and Margaret for that presentation. It was pretty detailed. It's been good working with you over the last year and a half, 2 years to get to this point. Questions for the group, Vice Mayor?
If I could, Bill Spakowski's here. He has an extensive history with Fort Myers Beach. I'm curious, Bill, as to your thoughts here, particularly next steps, and also did you have a particular aha moment as you were doing this analysis?
The aha moment each time I come down here is where you've come from 2 years ago, because I mean it's still shocking as somebody who's never lived here but has worked here a long time. But the willingness of you all to keep pushing forward is just phenomenal. It's completely energized us, which doesn't make any of the solutions easy though. And for instance, at Times Square, it's different than, let's say, the Red Coconut, where one company bought the property and that one company can come to you for rezoning, or they can sell the property, or they can sit on it. Times Square is not the same way with all the small owners. The multiple small owners was actually, in my view, the lifeblood of Times Square. In that one small area, you had 8 or 10 different businesses, all competing for attention and service. And that's really cool. And that's one of the things that makes Fort Myers Beach so different from many other beach communities, where everything is big and often fancy, but not that kind of variety. But at Times Square, if you just do nothing, you're not going to get a proposal coming to you, I don't think, in the same way that you will from some of these other properties. Who's going to move forward unless they either own all the properties or have agreements from the other owners? And so that's just a problem opportunity that doesn't fix itself. I think the question for the town is, for the town council is, do you want to wade into that or not? Or you just want to sit back and wait and see if somebody acquires all the property? Because there are things that you could do to enable interim or even longer term uses of a very low cost and scale. We're following, of course, the issues with FEMA and La Jolla and shipping containers. And so you might draw from that conclusion that there's no way that this sort of low scale, movable retail can work there. And that's not true. You can't have the shipping containers. But that doesn't mean there couldn't be some combination of food trucks and shade structures that would allow the individual owners to go back to providing the same kind of services they did before, but in structures that are, well, they're not actually wouldn't be structures, they'd be vehicles that provide food. And so, but that would take sort of you moving forward, because your current code greatly restricts mobile vending and transient vendors, and those are seen as pests that you might tolerate. But in fact, that option one is, the Times Square options is actually making that a plan. And it would take changes to your code to do, and confirmation from FEMA about can't run afoul of FEMA on the flood insurance, as you know, because they have a stick that's so big that you can't really avoid them. But I think there is a middle ground, and that's what we illustrated in option one. And also option one illustrates a public acquisition. It's got to be a willing seller. We put a lot of effort into trying to find out if that's possible. We understand the town can't afford to do that. And FEMA and other agencies often do buy out flood damaged property, but it's usually residential. And so one of the things we explored was, might they buy out flood damaged commercial property? And the answer is possibly, but it is not a specific program that says, file an application by October 1. But it is an opportunity that could be pursued, because it's not outside their mandate. It's just there's not a funding source available right now. But are the property owners interested? Because if they're not, nobody's going to come in and take that property and condemn it. So anyway, it's just the number of issues that you always had down here that made such a fascinating place, plus all the new issues. It seems overwhelming, but it also has a lot of opportunities, given the community desire to recreate as best we can what this place has always been.
Thank you, Bill. I always welcome your insights. Don't hide your light under a bushel. As we go through this process, if you have thoughts or ideas, particularly as the policy entity for the island, policy-making entity for the council, you gave us a suggestion on how we could be helpful short-term for Times Square, but longer-term, given the fact that we have a multitude of ownership there, aside from FEMA coming in, or a federal entity, or even the state or the county, to purchase the entire Times Square and create a vision. Any other ways you think, given the current dynamics, where the town council can be helpful?
Well, again, it's a matter of pursuing some of these sources. I mentioned possibly FEMA, but of course the Tourist Development Council spends a lot of money at Fort Myers Beach because they know you are one of the biggest draws for tourism of the entire county. And again, it's not something, buying commercial property is not something they have done, but they do things today that they didn't do before. Somebody came to them and said, hey, what about this? The tree nourishment, for instance, they used to say we would never do that. And then suddenly they're contributing to that because they see it's important to tourism. So, but that would take the town council saying, we really think this would be a good idea, and meeting with them and seeing if it might be possible. And so these are the things, though, that, I know you've got a million things on your plate just trying to get through the day. On the other hand, if you don't push on some of these from the top, they're not going to happen.
Thank you.
John, any questions for the group?
Not currently, thank you.
Scott?
I think I just have a comment is specifically, and then I do have a question for you, Bill. My comment is on the first plan. I mean, we got an email this week from, I think we all got it from Linda Miller, and what she said is what I'm hearing from my guests. They were happy to come down and support the community year one. Year two, okay, I kind of get the food trucks that we're getting things going, but year three, they don't want to come back here and have food trucks. I think we need to focus on brick and mortar. If we're going to retain guests coming year after year after year, I just don't think that first option is viable, because the people I'm talking to, and Linda verified it, is that tourists don't want food trucks. They want brick and mortar. And I think, I think everybody thinks, oh, food trucks, great idea. Well, it's cool. Yeah, it's cool once a month, but day after day after day, food trucks. Now, I mean, I want to support the businesses, but we've got to move forward. So I guess, Bill, my question to you, sir, is of this report, what can we tackle the easiest and the fastest? Would it be Newton Park? Would it be the interconnectivity?
Certainly, it's Newton Beach Park is the first, because you've already obtained funding just recently for that. You have a conceptual drawing now. Obviously, needs detailed engineering and all the things that that would have to be commissioned by the town using those funds. So that's number one, doable. A lot of these others are a lot more complicated. For instance, just as you mentioned about the food trucks. I mean, if you think of food truck experiences, standing in line out in the sun and waiting for your order and then sitting on a picnic table. Okay, food's good, that's nice, but it's not an appealing experience. But what people are doing all around the state and around the country is creating food truck parks where the experience is not like that, and it is an attraction. Maybe
Sure,
not.
the one name escapes me. There's one out by the airport.
There's one by the airport. There's one in downtown Fort Myers on Bay Street that just opened a few months ago.
Yeah. Backyard Social.
And it's
There's one in
It's
Benita.
not Backyard Social, but it's on Bay Street right across from the convention center. And there's celebration in Collier County, and they're popping up all around. And so what they have there, food's coming out of a food truck, but the seating area is fun, and there's often live music and there's shade, and often actually table service.
Right.
So it's not the old Times Square back. It would be not as good, but it could be good. And one of the things I say, don't dismiss this, because even if ultimately the future is bricks and mortar, that can take years and years, and this kind of could be an interim step. But it would, like I say, would take some changes to your code that you'd have to do. So if there's no consensus to do it, and don't spend any more time on it, there's consensus to consider it, you would have to take the action to direct the amendments be written by your staff.
The other problem with that, though, too, Bill, is that, I understand the food trucks for food, but people also want beer and wine and liquor and drinks. And the way the liquor license is you can't serve out of a mobile trailer. So a food truck on wheels cannot serve the liquor, which is where Laola kind of butted heads with everything, because they made the stable container for the liquor sales and they had the food truck. So, I mean, how do you change the state liquor license type things, or how do you make headway with something like that, even on a temporary basis?
Yeah, this is the one I referring to on Bay Street, downtown, basically had that same issue. It's as much an entertainment venue as food.
Hmm.
And they do have 3 shipping containers there.
But FEMA says we can't.
They can do it because they're in the A zone.
Right.
You're on the other side of the
Right.
line.
And this is,
And so you can't use the shipping containers, period. I wouldn't, the state liquor laws don't change often, but I would never say under different circumstances that they're not changeable. Because this is an economic development issue. It would have applicability other places. And although the state might not want to change that for everywhere, I mean, what to do with popular places along the beach where you can't do it what you did before. I mean, that's actually something I think would be of interest to the state, and I would immediately assume that that's not possible.
Yeah, I would think our goal would be, you know, I fearful that when the pier gets built and still nothing's going on there, that wasn't our goal. Our goal was to have everything kind of dovetail together and open at once.
The biggest issue I've had with it is we've tried to get all the owners together to sit down in a room and come up with a plan, and it obviously is not going to happen.
No.
Unless you have everybody willing to play in the sandbox together, nothing like this is going to happen with brick and mortar. How do you get to a point of having one person controlling most of that?
Mhm.
And as you said, Bill, I don't know that the town has the resources to be able to acquire that land, especially at the cost of what some of the landowners want for it. But I don't see how we can get to your point, Scott, with the piers coming, right?
Right.
And we still got
Mhm.
fencing sitting down there. So, we gotta attack that part first. We gotta get that stuff out of there first. So then you can maybe see a vision of what it can do. And we need to be good stewards of our own property. We've got the Times Square right away in there. We need to lead by example. We need to get ahead of this, and we need to start putting that in. I know when we were trying to do it before the storm, there was infrastructure things that were going to be going into it that would tie into the existing businesses, and not knowing what's going in there makes it a little bit more difficult. But I think we need to take the first step in leading by example and
I
taking care of
totally
our
agree.
taking care of our area, especially if we can get some funding through CDBGR or grant funding or something to be able to do that, to either one, entice the owners to get back to the table and work together, or sell it to somebody who's willing to be a good partner with the community and get this going, because the pier is coming. And
Mhm.
I share those same I don't want to say fears, but same
Sentiments.
concerns that you're gonna have a nice beautiful pier and we're still gonna have a fence sitting there with old dilapidated 4x2x2 squares of 17 coats of paint on it,
Yeah.
So I guess that would be my suggestion is to attack that alligator closest to the boat, and that's us.
Well, and I think some of the owners are moving ahead in their own direction.
Yeah.
Now, whether that's the best thing for that, because there is, that the one drawing that the neighborhood company did showed a lot of economy of scale of them working together and sharing elevators and doing all that, but it takes money. And a lot of these owners don't have the funding to be able to do that. So where we as a town could help in some of that funding measure and some of those grants, and with the TDC or with, CRBGDR, wherever it could come from, to give them a boost or give them a direction. I mean, I think that's something we got to be focusing on as well.
I agree. I would love to see the town try to put a plan in place to acquire the property, to be able to do what we can do to tie into our right of way. Is that feasible? I don't know. It never hurts to ask, right? But you got to have a willing seller, I think is what Bill said. You got to have a willing seller and a willing buyer.
Well, we have willing sellers, just not at
At-
affordable
at a
pricing.
pricing that, yes, that's true.
Not realistic pricing.
I think that's
let's
a
say.
question that should go out to our residents as well. How important would it be for the town to potentially own that property between Crescent and Glen Hall Park? And would they be willing to fund it? I don't know. I guess we could ask them to find out, but
It'd be a great public survey.
do something. But I mean, I guess, Bill, if you had a magic wand, what would you, I mean, you've been so instrumental in the comprehensive plan of Land Development over the last 30 years that you've seen a lot of changes. You've seen people come and go. In your head, what would you see is the best possible outcome for the town when it comes to the Times Square?
Well, so many things are incredibly expensive and take so much coordination. But there are other things that are simple, like changing the land development. I don't mean it's simple, it's
Right.
complicated, but comparatively it's simple. And so when I see a rule, and I may have written it for the town 25 years ago on local vending that would prohibit this sort of food truck park concept. Prohibit it not because somebody thought about that and said we shouldn't allow that, but because they thought of somebody else's mobile vendor popping up in front of somebody else's business, so it was real restricted. So to me, eliminating code barriers where they should be eliminated is so simple that you should do it, even if ultimately Times Square has a brick and mortar solution. Because why wouldn't you want to have some small, medium things happening in Times Square if the problem is largely a rule that was written for a different purpose? So I think some rules like that are real easy to change. Other rules that are a little harder to change is, for instance, trying to imagine different kinds of development rules for Times Square. The rules you have now were, again, from 2002, and they said that any of those owners can rebuild up a story with the same square footage, but now up a story. Nobody took advantage of that. I think, I'm not sure. But because the cost of doing that is really high for a small property. I mean, in the space you waste on the stairs and elevators, it's really prohibitive. You do now allow 2 stories above flood. So that helps, but it's still problematic for the small owners. And there's almost no way for you to deal with that because you're not in the development business of buying people out. You don't have the money, you don't have the desire. You probably wouldn't want to do it even if you had all that. But when I talk about the possibility of acquisition, any government agency that's going to acquire that property cannot pay more than market value. So it doesn't really matter if somebody paid too much, because out of enthusiasm, that nobody's guaranteed to get out of it what they put into it. If they put into too much, nobody knows what that too much number. That's what property appraisers do and argue about. So I think that the possibility of acquisition with funding from outside the town, whether it would be Tourist Development Council or some of these FEMA programs, is definitely worth exploring, because the effort to do that is, again, it's like changing the land development code. It's relatively small compared with going out and building a building. If a private owner does that, or you as the town do it with your town hall, suddenly you need parking, and suddenly you get into that and you end up with huge expenses. So do the easiest stuff first. That's my bottom line suggestion.
Yeah, I mean, anybody that hasn't had a chance to check out Backyard Social in Fort Myers, it's actually kind of interesting how they use shipping containers, but they elevated them. So I guess it depends on FEMA. Carl's not here, but so you could technically use shipping containers for alcohol service or whatever if they're elevated to a certain height. So I don't know if that's kind of a midway solution to something like you're talking about versus just food trucks, but providing a space like that. Again, if nobody's been there, they've got nice patio up there you can sit on. It's covered. It's open air, but it's covered where they're serving food and alcohol. They got a little stage there. It's pretty neat, and it was fairly inexpensive. In talking to the people that put that together, compared to brick and mortar, it's a cool concept. It's something I think the town could do very easily. I think it would be something that would be financially achievable from the property owners there, to allow like the Laola's type of open. People love that space, right? So to do some kind of backyard social thing there on that property, I think that's something that like Chris or somebody could probably function and make that happen. But
And by changing a few minor rules, you would allow any individual owner on their own to do something. Maybe not the liquor house. I'm not as familiar as you are with that rule. And I do know that the backyard social, I did look at it pretty closely, and concluded that it could not be done, and it cannot be replicated exactly at Times Square because of your flood zone.
Right.
But the shipping containers and the liquor, I think, is the key difference. They were allowed to do that by elevating just a very small amount. Your elevation requirements are really high, and by the time you get up that high, whether it still makes sense to do it in shipping container, I don't know. But again, if the, so that could either be or could be both, an interim solution for individual owners to start activating that space. It could ultimately be something that a lot of people would want to do either jointly or individually. Again, few rules in the way, a few unnecessary rules in the way, that's the kind of thing to start with.
All right. Well, thank you, Bill.
Yeah,
Yes,
just one more, Bill, because you're here. We don't often get you here in the benefit of your wisdom. I'm curious because the report focused a lot on re-energizing Old San Carlos. I'm not trying to get into the granular details of the proposal, but I'm curious as to your thoughts. If a more modest Arches proposal was to resurface at Moss Marine, what do you think the impact of that would be on on energizing Old San Carlos, that corridor there?
I mean, it could either help or it could draw energy away, and it's hard to know. I mean, the concept behind the Arches was you have sort of an anchor for Old San Carlos at Times Square, and this could have another waterfront anchor at the other end, and the idea being it would benefit the whole. But right now Old San Carlos is pretty beat up, and this fall's storms sure didn't help, and are likely to continue being a problem. And something really new and nice and shiny next to something pretty drab and run down, it could also sap energy. I wouldn't try and tell you what I think would happen. I don't know.
Okay, thank you.
But I mean, the idea was Old San Carlos and Times Square always worked together. That was always the idea in the beginning, was you had this little tiny kernel of Times Square, and then Old San Carlos was just the entry road off the bridge with a few abandoned fast food stores.
But I'm just wondering, with the struggles with Times Square, with the synergy of an Arches proposal with Margaritaville, it seems like that corridor with Old San Carlos might be enhanced.
It might be, and also Crescent Street could be enhanced, again being the connecting point between. When people go out for the evening, they don't just go to one place; they like to go sometimes to a couple places, and that's the walk in between. So it could benefit definitely.
Thank you.
Mayor,
Yes.
if I may, a couple of options, and as I'm listening, obviously P3s are very functional in a municipality, public-private partnership. Of course, you have to own the land. So if we did that, that'd be a bond issue. The other thing is that we did talk about it ad nauseum is the, I just slipped my mind, but the CRA for that whole area where all the tax dollars go there. And of course, as Times Square would be developed, everything would have to leave in order for construction for 2 years. It would just be a dead zone. So there's a lot to think about. Investing money in a storage unit, connexes to be put up, and then they'd have to come out at some point, and that type of thing. So there's a lot to think about with a P3, but that is an option, and a lot of towns and municipalities do that. But I think the CRA is probably going to be the best focus, and that way all that revenue stays in that area for 20, 30 years, whatever the time. I think it's 20 years, if I'm not mistaken. So we probably need to really start focusing on that, particularly in that area. At least start the
And
money
for those
part.
for those non-Floridians, CRE is similar to a TIF district. Is that correct?
That is correct, yes.
If I may just comment real quickly to Bill's comment and to Andy's comment. The city of Cape Coral is currently building a food court, mobile food truck court right on the Caloosahatchee, right when you come off the Cape Coral Bridge. It's been a project that's been going on for a year now. They have no issues with the restrooms, just like our friends at Margaritaville did there on the beach. But they've got that figured out, and it's going to be an in and out type place with all the utilities coming from above. They've thought it out pretty well, and they're due to open here, I think, in the spring. And it'll host pretty close to 10 different food truck vendors with restroom facilities, and it's right there for everyone to see. There's a lot of different options for, lack of a better term, quick income and quick turnaround. But the long-term solution is going to be a bigger pill to swallow.
Again, I think it starts with us leading the bus.
Correct.
Right? Or driving the bus. We've got land there we can take care of. We need to start taking care of it. All right, thanks, Bill. Unless somebody else has a question for Bill. Okay. All right, again, thanks, team, for all your hard work and this report. I'm sure people that are listening are clicking on there to check it out now. So have a great day. Happy holidays. Merry Christmas. whatever, whichever floats your boat. Thanks.
Same to you. Thank you so much.
Yep, take care.
How'd you know I was a Botarian?
All right, next is item B, the leasing of town right away for private property use. Who's gonna start that? Judith?
Good morning, Judith Frankel, with the planning staff. This issue has come up a couple times with proposals that planning staff had seen. And so we wanted to bring it to you all in this less formal setting before we bring you an actual proposal, just to kind of test and see where your feelings are. I would like to let you know that one particular application that we've seen, the representative is here today, Mr. Jim Inc., representing 1901 Estero. I'm told that typically at M&Ps you don't take public comment, but I'm also told that that's up to you. And I think that he is prepared to give public comment on the topic, if that's your desire.
Well, I think first let's get our questions to you, and maybe he wouldn't need to, he may not need to speak if he
Okay.
doesn't,
So I have included in your backup material the kind of receipt and forms that 1901 Estero had historically used, just so you could see an example of what has been historically done. And but I have not provided to you the proposal that staff has seen for what would happen on that site. So it's really just to kind of get a policy direction.
Well, I guess my question to you first, Judith, would be, if this was already a policy that was in place before, why is staff bringing it forward now to potentially, is it your recommendation that you want to change it, or?
No, so I don't have a particular recommendation. I'm asking for your
Well, I
recommendation.
guess what I'm
So,
trying to get at is if it's already been in place, that it's been allowable,
yes.
why is it coming before us if we
Yes.
haven't brought it up that it was an issue?
So,
Can you,
there's
Judith, real quick, I'm sorry
Right.
to interrupt, but for the people who are watching, they don't have a packet in front of them. Could you explain what this property is? And-
Sure.
Yeah.
So can I answer the mayor's
Yeah,
question? Okay.
whatever works best.
So in reviewing what the town policy is resolution 18-20, which really just seemed to carry forward what had been established pre the incorporation of the town. So when the town was being run by the county, there were certain right-of-way portions that the county had leased to private property owners, and there was an agreed-upon amount for that leasing. And then Resolution 1820 kind of carried that forward. So if you had an existing agreement, the town agreed to continue with that agreement. Now, because a lot of those properties, and there's not very many of them, I think there's about 6 where we're talking about parking specifically, those properties are coming for redevelopment. So in our opinion, because there are new property owners, because there are new projects going in, this is the opportunity to consider whether you want to continue that. And if you would like to continue it as is, we can bring a new resolution just to memorialize it as policy as these projects come back. So we thought this was a good time just to bring it to you. Do you want to continue in this manner, or do you want to, revisit it in some way? 1901 Estero is the corner of Estero in Ohio. It's where the former Hoosiers restaurant was, and what they're planning to redevelop that property. And meeting with staff, they said along with the redevelopment, they would like to maintain that that leasing, that relationship with the town of leasing about 9 spots along Ohio. So we, in speaking with the town attorney, how would we set up this agreement? What would it look like? What is the rate going to be? And the property owner was kind enough to provide us with their historic documents about that agreement. And so that's what you see in your packet. I just wanted to show you what the price was, what the application looked like, and how that was operating. So the question is really, are you fine with that? Should we continue with that process, or would you like to do something different moving forward?
Have we had any conversations with the fire district? I mean, they're the ones that I think we would want to get, as long as it doesn't bother them, I don't seem to have an issue with it, but I mean, especially if it's been done in the past.
So I have not had communication with the fire department. Generally, there's standards for the width of the right of way,
Mhm.
you know, for vehicle traveling, and that would be, you know, respected. This is kind of additional width of the right of way. There's many of these cases, I said there's about 6 where it's been parking spots that were allowed to be used. There's another one where it was really an alleyway. And then the permit has also been used for sidewalk cafe options, but we haven't seen any of those recently. So just did I answer your question?
Well, you
Vice
did,
Mayor?
but you've also teased out some potential breaking news about the Hoosiers redevelopment. Is there anything that you want, any additional detail you feel comfortable sharing? Or I see
Well,
Jim
so
in the
you might want
audience.
to ask Mr. Inc. about that. They are working on something that we want to bring to LPA, but their proposal is dependent on being able to use that parking as they had historically used it.
Let's just
So we didn't want to bring it to the LPA until we had,
totally
kind of
understand, but
consensus.
let's work under the premise that, let's say that policy's continued.
Mhm.
What are we, in a general sense, what are we looking at for that property?
Well, let's get the questions out, and then if everybody's okay, we'll let Jim come up, and if he decides he wants to answer that.
If people are comfortable sharing,
Yeah.
of course.
I mean, one of the things that stood out to me when I saw it is $100 per space per year. I mean, that
Yeah.
goes back a long way, I think, and I would love to know what the current rate is for something like that in
So-
other municipalities.
I have a question though. There's another receipt for 424. So what, I was really confused that
So-
there's,
the way the pricing was set up is that it was $100 a spot unless you made your payment before November 30th of the previous year, and which it was discounted in half. So then it was only $50 a space.
Wow.
Pretty good deal.
that's a deal.
Yeah, I think that needs to be looked at no matter what.
So you did approve a new fee schedule, right? I think in June or July of this year, and that fee is, you know, continued in there. So we would probably need a new resolution to, if you wanted to adjust that.
Again, to add to that, the discussion we had, I believe it was with the Neptune
Mhm.
property. The potential for each spot at $5 per hour is $60 per day for those spots. Now that's potential. So you can't go with what is the, I guess once those spots start being used, you can actually go with the actual, what are we seeing? And we can kind of break it down farther. But each spot has a potential of bringing in at its max over that 12-hour period, $60 per spot. That's per day. So that's a far cry from $100 a year.
Right.
I guess for me, I see where you're going with it, with that, Karen. I'm just, and I see what you're saying, but without knowing what they want to put there and what they potentially might be asking for or not asking for,
Right.
It's hard.
You're putting the cart before the horse.
So I will add for this particular project, although I think it makes sense to think about it as a general policy
Mhm.
for everyone. It's not that large of a site. They are trying to maintain the portion of the building that you see there, the blue portion, and, you know, building a new section of it. They feel, well, so in order to be compliant with their parking requirement, they would be dependent on this town-owned right-of-way
Right.
portion, which I think essentially makes it, even if it's an annual agreement, we're kind of agreeing that they can use it in perpetuity with the project. So that's another aspect of.
and you said there's potentially only 6 properties on the island that this would,
Well, historically, now we haven't reviewed all potential right-of-way spaces. I mean, and
Sure.
one of them for sure is, well, I won't say for sure, but one of them is probably not going to be asking for that. So if we're talking about 5, maybe historically, but we could see more. And there's an additional one property where they were using kind of an alleyway that we let them use. We may want to consider that because it's I think kind of a one-off. We may want to consider that individually when they come for their project, whether we want to continue that or not.
all right. John?
Nothing.
Yeah, I guess for me, I don't have an issue with continuing it forward. We can talk about the pricing of it, allow you to get time as you bring that resolution forward for you to look at other municipalities and see what the going rate is. I guess if this was done 30 years ago, what is it now? You know, is it something that, I don't know that $60 a day makes sense, but it's
Yeah, I thought-
expensive parking.
I had thought,
That's what we're currently getting at a spot.
I may be incorrect, but I thought before the storm, when the town had some parking spaces, or some right of way issues where we were parking cars at my hotel and at a couple other hotels. I thought the going rate was like $1,000 a spot a year.
Yeah, I don't know. I guess I would put that back on staff to.
I mean, I never did it, but that's kind of the number I thought was floated out there, that
So-
it was.
I did talk to Tom Yazzo yesterday, and I know that the town has been doing some rental of parking spaces. Like occasionally, if you're doing construction, you might want to rent the space for your trucks or staging or something like that. And there's a separate licensing agreement that we worked on. So maybe you want to use that in these situations. I think this was different because it was, you know, not grandfather, but it was just like carried over from what the previous agreement had been.
Right.
So if there had been something new, they might have fallen under that licensing agreement that code compliance had worked on.
Yeah, because there's a lot of, right by Times Square, there's a couple hotels and condos that timeshares that I thought it was $1,000 a spot.
Okay.
Well-
We can look at that. It wouldn't have fallen under this right of way permit
Mhm.
Okay,
that
so-
this particular property
Yeah.
was utilizing.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I have no problem with moving forward or staying with the right of way agreement. I just think we need to look at the cost or at the pricing of it.
Okay. My second question would be, would you want us to bring forth a resolution with a suggested amount
Yes.
Yes.
before you see the project? Or could we bring them at the same time?
I'd like to see them together.
Yeah, I don't have an issue.
Might have a
That
much
makes
better
sense.
idea of what the overall project's gonna
Yeah.
look like.
But we're
Nancy looks like
only
she's got
ready
something.
to start
Well-
one project, right?
I just wanted
I
to.
think you should do it as soon as possible
Yeah,
because
me
there's
too.
other people that may have this issue when they're looking at, hey, am I going to buy this or not? We've set a precedent and the word's out that here's the deal going forward. So I would think you'd want to do this first before waiting on his project.
Okay. I mean, again, we
Wouldn't
could
you
ask
guys
him. I
agree?
think he would like to move forward. sooner
makes-
rather
that makes
than
sense to
later,
me.
but-
It's fine. It's
Mhm.
fine.
It makes sense to me.
Yeah.
At least you know ahead of time.
Because I don't want to do it just for this one project in mind. I want to see it's a change of policy and it should be a change for everybody.
Yeah, and
That needs it.
if I can add, I think Scott was looking at my notes. So what you have, I mean, these projects.
Oh, man. We're not in grad school anymore.
So you admit you've done it.
I can't see. That's my problem.
No, seriously though, these projects that come to you, they are all quasi judicial. So when these projects come, we'll make this disclosure. I'm glad that the applicant's representative is here today as well. So they are on a case by case basis, but I believe what Judith is asking is for policy direction, so that when there are other projects that come as well, just like Scott said, she knows which direction to go with them. And yes, so how do you want to handle that? I think I've heard that it's okay to have these type of agreements for certain projects as they come forward, and then also an issue on the fees. And then just, from a technical side, we're calling it a lease. It's really just a right-of-way permit, which is basically legally more of a license and not an actual leasing situation. So that's just a fine technicality I wanted to share.
That renews on an annual basis.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
I believe that's the policy direction you've been given.
So if I may, a point of personal privilege here, because some of us from Indiana are still savoring the possibility of a breaded pork tenderloin again at Hoosiers. Can I
Iowa likes it too.
ask for unanimous consent to allow Jim Inkes to discuss what to the extent he
If you-
wants to discuss, since he's here today, just give him a minute or two.
I have no problem with that. You guys have any?
Nope, not
Come on
at
up,
all.
Jim.
Greg.
Come on up, Jim.
Good morning. For the record, Jim Hank, Hank Engineering. I've been here as a planner and an engineer, and this project 1901 Estero has been going on for a very long time, and we're having a lot of little hiccups and difficulty getting it there. But the intent is, under the build back provisions, to put back the square footage and put back the uses that were there before. So yes, restaurant upstairs is a high possibility. The problem being is under the build back provisions, site is not covered adequately of what that means. And we had a site that had parking on Estero, it had parking on Ohio, some parking on Ohio, which is what we're talking about this morning. And without that, we've done what can we do code compliant plan for staff through our year-long process we've been going through. And we can't build hardly anything. So that's why we brought that up, since we just want to put back what we had. Nothing more, nothing, actually less, because we backed off some of the parking on Estero, back out parking on Estero near the intersection to make it safer. But we're going to be before you. We're going to be asking for some variances. We're going to maybe be doing a PD. We're trying to figure out what that is right now so we can move forward. But Eddie, who, donated land for the sand sculpture or donated the use of the parking there for the sand sculpture thing that you recognized last week, he's very much interested. He would like to start construction now, but we seem to be having all these problems. So our goal today was to just get you guys to say, yeah, we like the idea. It's possible. The fee, I agree, $100 a year, kind of low, but that goes back a long time. So that's really where we are in our standpoint. And we would love to share the drawings and stuff that we have with you at some point in the near future, because it's very exciting.
Did you take comfort in the direction that we gave Judith, or was that not enough direction?
No, I think that was good direction. We're going to come back with a resolution. We'll bring it back together with whatever entitlement we need. I mean, when you ask for variances and the parking resolution, I don't know how that marries up. If we were doing a PD, let's say, then we can put it in the conditions of the PD. So that makes it unified, makes it control, keeps it for this project specifically, that if somebody else wants to use it, they have to determine that it works for them. You're not setting a precedence under the PD. So I'm just sitting in the audience. I don't really want to do another PD, but it is probably the right way to handle it in this situation.
Why wouldn't you do a DA?
Excuse me?
What about a development agreement?
I'm not a big fan of the development agreement yet, but we would look at that. I'm more in tune to doing a PD. I don't think time frame really makes any difference. Cost doesn't make any really difference. I just think the PD is better in that instance, but maybe the DA works. We're just trying to get direction so we can move forward.
Sorry about that.
We would love to have it done now.
I get fined.
Yeah, new guy. All right.
And the mayor did see a little sneak peek of the rendering.
I
So
did.
It's
Just
Whoa.
I'll tell you what, I'll pass it around. We'll pass it around.
And I just, for staff's edification, we still are treating every project as a case-by-case
Sure.
basis.
Sure.
So there are some that may have had things available to them in the past that doesn't make sense moving forward in the way that we're building back our town. But those things, again, just like council said, treated as a case-to-case basis.
Nancy, because we're seeing it, does it mean the public?
Yes, it's now going to become officially public. Ed, you'll get one.
Yeah, I think Amy's already had a request for a copy of it.
Oh,
And then
Wow, fast.
we'll make the disclosures at your
And
meeting.
what you
Got nothing going
see,
on.
the development
Slow
is
day.
the structure that's there now. The base structure was
Just adding
designed
to
as floodproof. The base structure is solid.
I think it's
So we're going to
cool.
just strip it
Really
down to the
cool.
structure. We're going to rebuild that section, and it's just gingerbreading on the outside. Albert does a really good job. And then we're replacing the old wood structure that was lost in the storm on the other side. And we've got the stuff. So, I mean, we're real excited about it. And like I said, we would love to have it open.
That's a beautiful piece of architecture, Jim.
it's great.
And since you're so loquacious this morning, do you have any, do you have ability to share whether Hoosiers might be coming back?
I don't know the details of that. I mean, that's up to the restaurateur tenant who had that or someone who wants to do that.
Okay.
I mean, I don't think there's any objection to putting Hoosiers back.
Right.
It's just who.
We don't know.
The
yet.
owner is just a landlord.
Okay.
So Jim, what it,
You can have this.
Thank
never
you.
mind. Oh,
You can
Yeah.
look.
never mind. You already answered my question, so.
Okay. Thank you for the time.
All
I
right.
look forward to coming back with getting this going.
Thanks, Jim.
Yay.
Anything else on that? Anyone? John? No? All right. Next is item C, Code of Ethics. It's a review of the town code of ethics policy.
This is me. This shouldn't take very long because all I'm trying to do is just get a little direction and actually not really consensus. I'm just going to let you know what we're going to be doing. A couple meetings ago when Council King brought up my employment agreement, I went and started looking at that to make sure that whatever we brought back to you was proper. And I noticed something in here about the code of ethics that I'm required to be governed by. And it's Florida Code of Ethics for Public Officers and Employees. That's all of us, by the way. Town Code of Ethics, Public Records of Law, Sunshine Law, or the Lee County Code of Ethics. So it was like blah, 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 or. Plus, we have a handbook that Talisa is working on. We're trying to get everything a little more streamlined, a little more 21st century, as we've talked a little bit about that, even with the parking fee for that. So I'm going to have meetings with you so we can discuss this, so we can make sure that it took me a little while to find. I had to go to the clerk, and I had to do a few things just to get all of them combined. And they're all very similar. But the Lee County one was kind of a new one to me because it's like, okay, I get that, but we should be standalone from them. So I just wanted to incorporate ours, update ours. I'll get with the attorney. We'll work through this to make sure that we bring back one that's, it's changing times. I know we all do our annual ethics training. I want to make sure our staff's doing that, things like that. So I want everything incorporated into one document instead of, 4 or 5 documents. Okay, well, this one doesn't say that, but this one says that. So which one are we disciplining people by, and how are we doing this? I just want to make sure we're consistent with how we move forward with everything we do. And we're reviewing the handbook. We want to just make sure everything's just all the T's are crossed and I's are dotted. So it's just made me think about it because I'm also bound by the ICMA, International City Managers Association, that I'm a member of. Their code of ethics. It's on my wall. So they're all kind of, and town staff should be too, but they're not members of that. So I want to make sure that we just incorporate the right things. And again, there's no issues. The issue is that we're being governed by 4 or 5 codes of ethics. Did I say that right? Code of ethics. But you get the point. So I just want to make sure. And if you had any input now, or I will have individual meetings with you specifically about this.
One of the things that when I was reading through all this, that I think is a huge miss, and probably because it hasn't been looked at in so many years, is social media and how that plays into everything, whether it's through interviews or postings or whatever it may be, because a lot of times there's a lot of information leaked before it comes from our PIO. And that is, I think, not ethical. So I just think that we need to bring it up to the 21st century, because I'm sure when all this was in and nobody's updated it, but social media wasn't a factor. YouTube's, everything else, media platforms, it wasn't a factor. And now it is. And especially, when we're being asked about things that are coming up for votes and giving our opinions in public is, there's that cone of silence when we go out for bids and things. Why wouldn't we have that same thing when we're coming up for voting on things? So I don't know. That's just some of my thoughts when I was reading through all this.
I couldn't agree more.
Okay. Yeah.
I don't know. I was mesmerized by a phony Southern accent, but
I
No,
had a,
go ahead. No, go ahead.
I had a constituent who is a regular viewer of these proceedings and reads through the packets diligently, and she had some questions about the clarity of the gift rule for the town employees and for the town council. And Nancy, I don't know if you've had a chance to review the document yet, but it seemed a bit unclear. And when this comes forward, if we could just clarify that for the public.
Yes, I'm happy to do that. In fact, I'm working with Talisa. We're trying to get a PowerPoint presentation or a video so that when she does her onboarding for employees, that they would be aware of what their requirements are, and then we would put that in your code of ethics as it applies to you.
Okay. And when that comes forward, would you mind just giving a brief recap publicly of what the gift rule is, so the public can be aware of
Yes.
it as well? Right.
Yes,
Thank you.
Thank you.
I have an interesting example about that. When I was at the city of Jacksonville in 2000, I was part of the ethics committee that was forming the ethics policy for the city of Jacksonville. So I think gifts were, there was a highest threshold for everybody except elected officials. And so we were trying to formulate that and trying to get it to where it was consistent. There was a lot of resistance. I'm not saying there's a resistance. That's not my point. My point was that everything was agreed to for years. And all of a sudden there was a new owner of the Jacksonville Jaguars, and there was a new box, and there was a new way to, and the town owned the stadium and stuff like that. So how did we allow them now to sit in the box for the owner of the Jacksonville Jaguars when during the games and things like that? So then the council, a 19-member council, voted almost unanimously, okay, well, that's okay for us to do that, but nobody else can do that. So, so then that threshold, what's that amount? And everywhere I've been before, if you do something like, okay, then I pay you back, or you pay your way. But anyhow,
Is
yeah,
watching
that's
is watching the Jaguars a benefit? I think it'd be more like a punishment.
Well,
This year,
there had been a time, of course, when the Packers. Well, I'm just going to stop. But no, I'm not a Jaguars fan. I was making an example. So and I think
I
the
know.
people who live in Jacksonville would probably argue that point. But I do know there's probably a lot of people who play against the Jaguars who like to go, the games too and stuff. So I'm just, but I thought it was interesting that that was, 10, 12 years ago that I heard that they had changed their ethics policy just to make an exception for that particular thing. So we it's kind of a slippery slope sometimes.
So does that value, is it set every like 10 years, or is it?
I think
is there
even in
cost
that
of-
situation, if they change their local code, their local ethics code, they're still going to be bound by
Correct.
112. And that is really where we need to look for guidance as far as what you can do and what you can't do. And I did have a couple questions here in the town about the gift law and its applicability. So, so we'll bring that to you, a revision.
Very good.
That's all.
do these just apply to employees, or would our committees even be bound by this?
Committees as well.
That's a good point. One thing we even did was with our ethics and even all of our policies everywhere I've been before, and I'm pretty sure, but we made sure that it was put in all of our contracts too, that any of the contractors, they understood, sexual harassment policies. I'm going a little further, but they had to agree to all of that they are now bound by our policies as it relates to everything. So that was interesting to bring that up. I think it goes beyond just employees at times. Anybody we contract with as well should be bound by that.
Well, then, I guess I would like to see us, because I'm not sure we've covered committees on this. We do the sunshine law, but maybe we should piggyback on that as well when we do a presentation to those committees.
We can do that. And I just also want to add that in the city of Naples, they have a standalone ethics commission. They have an ethics code, and then their local commission actually reviews complaints for possible violations of it.
That's true.
So that's in addition to the statewide ethics commission. And there's a couple other communities that have a similar structure. I'm not advocating that I just want you to know about it if somebody brings it up. But the other ethics commissions are more so on the East Coast.
Correct. Would you, to John's question, Nancy, would you have a challenge legally enforcing that? I could see potentially the advisory committees that are statutory advisory committees like LPA and audit committee but the other committees are not statutory advisory committees. Could they be bound?
I think they are, yes.
Okay.
Yeah. But I'll check, just
Okay.
to double check.
See, and I thought just the opposite. I thought only the statutory committees were bound by that and not like the board cab or cell cab or something like that. So it'd be interesting to find out which is which.
Well, I guess it depends on what we're talking about ethics. If we're talking about what Andy was talking about with monetary gain or something like that, then yeah, I can get away with that. But I would hope we'd all be bound ethically, whether we're serving on a committee or not.
Anything else, Andy?
No, sir. Thank you.
All right. Next is item D, advisory committee appointments.
So this one and the next one we're bringing to you at a recent meeting. We went through, we revised your policy on selection of members to serve on committees. This item D is basically revising your manual, your rules and procedures, your policies and procedurals manual to clarify that when there's a tie, that the next vote would only be of the individuals who were tied, not everyone
whole
that
thing.
had not been selected, because we kind of got hung up a little bit on that the last go around. So, today's a workshop, so we'll be bringing that to you on a future agenda.
Yeah, but I was reading in there, the change, I think we all agree with that change, but do we need to go further? When you say a tie, technically 0 and 0 was a tie.
Yeah.
So you must at least receive, because you could read it either way in there.
You have to receive
Okay.
at least one vote.
At
Yeah.
least one vote that results in a tie.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
No, it should be the people that are tied, not if
Yeah, but
somebody
no,
is
no,
there's
it
two
is.
and two and somebody has one, the person with one is
Right, well, there wouldn't be a tie, right? If there's
Right.
two people at 2 and one at 1. My point was if no one receives any votes, that's 0.
Well, okay,
is
so a
still
tie of 3, a
Yeah,
tie of
3.
3.
Yes.
So anyone that has the same number in that tie, a tie vote
Excluding
among.
0. Because if there's
If there's 0, you don't want them appointed. Is what
right,
I'm hearing you
because
say.
what I'm saying
Okay.
is someone could say, well, 0 is still a tie. Why am I
Correct.
not getting? Why
That's
am
a
I
good
not-
point.
you know,
Okay,
Of
I can
anybody
clarify
receiving
that.
votes.
And you have to
Mhm.
receive at least one vote.
but you're still opening yourself up if just like with Murph, there was a whole gob of people applying, and a number of people got one vote, but there were 2 people with 2 votes. I just want the closest to that threshold to be in the runoff, not everybody that gets
Right.
a vote.
Right.
You could turn yourself into a mathematical.
Which we kind of got into, I
Yeah,
think.
right, you can go on
Yeah.
forever.
We did
Right.
report
So I don't know
Right.
how to word that, but I think that
That's the
you would agree
intent.
that
Yeah, it
would
would be the highest of it.
Yeah.
If you had 2 people at 0, 2 at 1, and 2 at 2, you would move forward with
the
The
2
2
at
at
2.
2. Right. Right.
However, you have to
Mhm.
make that word.
Right. But if everybody
That
got
makes sense.
0, then we would go out and try to solicit perhaps more applications. Yeah. All right. I'll play with that wording, and then I'll bring it back to you at a future meeting, and you can take action upon the resolution.
That
So-
would have been so complicated.
Okay. So your next. Go ahead,
Okay,
Mayor.
we're good
Sorry.
there?
Yeah.
Next is advisory
about-
committees, item E. Qualifications. Is this you, Nancy?
Yes, this is. So this one is basically at that same meeting. There was a little bit of questions raised regarding what the qualifications were, and it was based on a recent amendment that you had made to your code of ordinance, or yes, to your code, that really broadened the ability of individuals to be considered as eligible for appointment. And that language appears on page 105 of your packet. And it basically reads, individuals with specialized experience or knowledge, individuals who have shown interest in the subject matter, or individuals who have a Fort Myers postal code. So we wanted to bring it back to this meeting to make sure that we got that right. And if you wanted to change that, we'll bring it back to another meeting at a first reading so you can change your ordinance.
Right, with the exception of what, the LPA and the audit committee, right, were the only two
Correct.
that had to be registered.
Correct, correct. And Amy just reminded me as well, another issue that has come up that we would like some guidance on is how many committees can they serve on? Because if it's two, we have to ask you if you're willing to allow them to have a waiver. But if it's three, do you still want us to bring that?
I think three's just too many.
I do too. I think two max.
I think two max.
Mhm.
I'm okay
Yeah,
with that.
I love the passion of any individual that wants to be on all these committees, but I think the two
Share the wealth.
share the wealth a little bit and the knowledge.
Okay, so that helps on that issue, but the first issue, as far as the qualifications, did you want any type of change there that we could bring back, or?
Here's my heartburn around this is these are town committees. And now we have individuals on there that are not that don't fall into those categories. They're a special category on their own because of their knowledge or their experience. There's nothing to say that the committee can't bring in an expert to talk about issues that come up, but these are town committees, and that kind of bothers me that we've now left off people that were town residents or qualified otherwise because someone who doesn't live here has some specialized experience or knowledge.
So John, where would you draw the line? Just on the island or 33931? Because a lot of people that live close by are, as the town is, the town's prosperity translates to their prosperity.
I'm not against that, Scott. That's why I
Okay.
advocated including the 33931 zip code.
Okay, that was my question.
Yeah.
Not
No,
we can go all the way up to.
This specifically deals with people that are experienced or knowledgeable that are now on a committee and have served in the past. I've got nothing against these people, but now it's a town committee. We've not allowed somebody that wanted to be a part of it to be a part of it because this person was picked because of their knowledge or experience.
So I guess my question is, there's still quite a number of, I don't know how many people on the committees are displaced. I know but do we penalize somebody for their house being destroyed in the end and they haven't gotten back to the island yet, or?
They're still property owners.
So
For the
as long
most
as they're
part.
property owners,
Yeah.
it's okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Or do we go back to the original premise that I think we had with, a nod is given to if you are a resident of the town or you own property in the town, that kind of thing, over someone who is not, if all things are equal, if their experience is equal, if their knowledge is equal, if that kind of thing, do we give special credence to someone who actually lives on the island?
I'm trying to understand the crux of your angst here, John. Is it because of the wording, the way it says specialized? Because the second line after that then says no specific.
That's
experience
what
requirements.
allowed an individual who doesn't live here to be on a committee. They don't reside here. They're not a property owner. They're not a voter. So they're now on a committee that has bumped other individuals that live here because of their knowledge or experience, is what I'm trying to say. To me, and we heard it from Ms. Kane, I believe that's her name, that the original MRF committee did allow those individuals to be a part of that. I know in talking to Bill Perry too, that he was part of the original MRF committee. He doesn't live here, but his expertise was used. Do we bump people because of that, or are these experts that can be brought in to discuss whatever issue they need? Or do we have a separate category that this person could be almost like a liaison because of their experience or knowledge? That's just what bothers me because it's a town committee, I think. Does that clear it up for you? Or?
Yeah, I mean, I guess what I see is every council is going to be different, right? When they appoint people and they're going to have different criteria. Like who I choose to vote for on a committee might be different than what you choose to vote for.
I agree with that, but
I like what Karen's saying about if you're a property owner or you live on the island, you should get preferential treatment to be on the committee.
But we didn't do that.
but we can't.
And that's what I'm trying to advocate for.
Yeah.
You don't have any pushback from me on that. I think it's important if you live on the island and you, just because you don't have experience in any specific subject doesn't necessarily mean you can't learn it, right?
And I agree.
You have any issues with that, Scott?
No, I see your point, John.
Thank you.
I think we should just keep still 33931.
Yeah, I think that's.
No,
what
it's in there.
said.
Yeah.
Okay, so I need a little clarification. So some of these criteria is really very important to Amy, because when she gets an application, she's going to say, can she check one of these boxes? But then at that point, all the names get brought to you if she's able to check the box. And then at that point, then you could say preference. And then maybe in your decision-making process, you just kind of put these at the top and these at the bottom, because these have the addresses in Fort Myers Beach and these don't. Would that work?
I think it makes sense to me. How you list them out on the ballot is residents.
What would you prefer, Amy?
I'll do it however you guys tell me to do it. Usually I put them on in just alphabetical order. So there's no, I put this one above that person or anything like that. So, but we can sure put island residents first, 33931 property owners, however you want me to sort them, I can.
I think for sunshine clarification, so we don't have to deal with this again, that makes the most sense.
Mhm.
And it's
Island
clear.
residents, 33931 property owners, others.
Right.
Well, I don't necessarily need property owner. I think it's just 33931 or an island resident.
Well, there's property owners.
Property owners is one of your criteria.
Mhm.
Yeah, voter.
Because again, people are displaced and
Property
or
owner.
somebody has a
And it's
Oh, I
business.
see, yeah.
It's or, it's not and,
Right.
it's or.
Okay. So we'll see. I think it's going to require a little tweaking on the language in your code. So you'll see it again at first reading and then second reading next year.
It's got to be the most discussed back and forth.
Right.
It's like a tennis match.
But it's important. so.
It is. All right. Is that it? Nancy?
Yes, yes, that is it. Thank you so much.
Agenda management. Scott, you got anything?
Yeah, I'd like to see if there's a flavor to look at a past ordinance. It's ordinance 1715. It outlawed medical marijuana distribution facilities on the beach. I think at the time it was almost as crazy as outlawing tattoo parlors back in the 70s. I think, times have changed. You go down to Key West, you see these shiny new buildings with a line out the door. So it's an economic engine. Now, do we want a couple? Are we okay with a couple on the island or a bunch? Or do we just still don't want any? But I want to see if anybody else would like to revisit this ordinance.
Karen? Just going down the line.
I know, thank you. I know medical marijuana is legal. People get prescriptions for it. With the right documentation and that kind of thing, what I don't want to see is a food truck, if you will, or a mobile.
I didn't see anything about a
I know.
weed wagon.
I don't want to see a mobile medical marijuana. If they want to invest in the community and do it right and go through the proper licensing and everything or permitting, I have no problem with that. I don't want to see mobile just pulling up and having a spot.
Jim?
I'm always willing to discuss anything of reason, and I'd certainly be okay with putting it on the calendar for discussion.
You only need two, right? Put it on there. We continue down. In fairness, I think we should.
In fairness.
John?
I don't know. I understand and I appreciate where Councilor Whitson came from on this because of the uproar of what happened in Times Square with the mobile I don't know what the appetite is out there for that. And I don't know what the appetite, because of the constitutional amendment that went down to defeat as well. So,
The appetite generally gets stronger
Yes.
when.
Oh, I knew that was coming.
That was a soft.
I know I was waiting for somebody else. Somebody has to set them up occasionally.
That was too easy.
And that's probably why he was
They
interested
should
in
sell
Hoosiers.
brownies at
He
the
was
same time.
interested in Hoosiers earlier
So
than when they're
hungry.
coming
What
back.
has to do with lunchtime?
I'm okay with discussing it. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm open to discuss anything, and I'm sure once it gets out that we're going to be discussing it, we'll
Oh, yeah.
we'll find out one way or another what the public feels about it. But
Yeah, it's fine.
Really?
put it
Think?
out there. Oh, I have no doubt. I have no doubt. All right. What else you got?
That's it. Thank you.
So I want to talk about meeting decorum with the meeting coming up on Monday that I think is once again going to be well visited. And I think that there is a process. I think there's a decorum. I think there's a way that, we have public comment. You're allowed your 3 minutes of public comment. You are not allowed to heckle. You are not allowed to have conversations in the back. And if you continue to do that, you should not be in the meeting.
I think clapping needs to be part of that as well.
Clapping, that should not be, that is not part of a town hall meeting, a formal meeting. I just think we need to set the boundaries at the beginning of the meeting and tell people, if you cannot abide by these rules, you will be removed from the meeting. End of story. I think it's disrespectful to our speakers, to our presenters. It's disrespectful to other people that are sitting in the audience. And I think if people want to act like that, they can act all they want, but they're not going to act like that in here. My opinion.
So what is it you would like to put on agenda management?
Oh, we're on that. Oh, that was just my opinion of something I wanted to discuss. But I do have, what is the second opinion on water project? That was for today, but I don't see anything on it. I had a question on that one. I don't know. It says 12/11/24 M&P second opinion on water project.
So the mayor had asked several times to get an independent contractor in here to take a look at our tier 1 project that was drafted by a different group of people.
Oh.
And as the moment, we've reached out to 5 different contractors, and none want to go on record or be engaged to look over the work of another one. We're still pursuing. And that's what I
Wow.
can
That's
tell you at
interesting.
this-
Yep.
That is interesting. Yeah, well, keep working at it. We will.
Yes, sir.
Anything else? Karen? No more on the list.
No.
Okay.
I would like to go back to my meeting request for Monday, but not during agenda management, I guess.
No, your point is well taken. I just wanted to make sure there was nothing you wanted to add to the agenda.
No, not at this time.
Jim?
Yeah, the only thing that comes to mind is, and we're seeing the magnitude of the project, and I think in a very positive way, of the beach renourishment project, which is obviously ongoing. I think, and I would yield to the town manager on this, either at the M&P and or at a upcoming town meeting, preferably not Monday because we have a pretty long agenda. But it would be great to have Mike Poff back. Every time he comes, I learn something, and
Yeah.
he's if you just give us an update and let people ask questions, I think it's very beneficial to the public because things are coming people's way. And I just think that the more information we have about when and how and what impact it has, it's always beneficial.
Yes.
And he can be obviously with Chad, but I just think Mike has a unique sort of neutral, and a great respect for Chad, but Mike Poff has an engineering, coastal engineering background that is very helpful, given what we're experiencing. That's all I've got.
John?
Nothing.
Just a couple of things potentially want to add. We've all gotten an email, I believe all of us have gotten it from the resident on the south end concerned with the pier and the pilings, about potentially removing them or putting them back, or are we going to go down there? I'd like to have it added for discussion. If you guys, I know you're working on trying to get
Yeah.
numbers and feasibility, and that would be nice to
Yeah.
bring that back to be able to
Okay.
discuss that.
We will.
If everybody's.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes, sir.
and having my Aunt Jeannie painted a portrait of those pilings that was hanging in our kitchen, pre-Ian. And those pilings are an interesting part of the history on the south end. And I appreciate you bringing it up today. I guess my question would be, and this maybe relates to the Mike Poff question, will the M&P happen in time for prior to beach renourishment hitting the pilings? I guess, in other words, we may not, the impact of what's coming with renourishment may happen before the next M&P meeting.
Well, but Chad had sent a note at 8:30 this morning, because I asked Chad about this. And he said he spoke with the coastal engineer and surveyor. If there's no objections from town council, we can shift the template such that the pilings are not impacted.
Oh, I didn't see that.
I
Yeah.
didn't see that either. Okay.
So that
haven't seen
was
it.
8:30 this morning. He said if anyone has any issues, please let Mr. Andy know and we'll address accordingly.
Okay, great.
Sounds like we don't need to worry about it then.
Right.
No.
I did not see that email.
Yeah, so it came at 8:30,
I
8:36.
forgot something.
What
Okay.
he does, we use his first name.
I just wanted to add, I got two more things.
Okay.
No, I just forgot the first one.
We'll stay on top of the pile.
Yeah. yeah,
Sorry.
okay.
Thank
No, it's
you.
all right.
No pun
The other one is,
Uh,
is based on the discussion today with R2P2. Do we want to put something on a future to
We need
have staff
to.
come back about town or Times Square and our
We need
portion
to.
of it in,
Yeah.
CRA.
Yeah,
whatever.
I was
Yeah.
gonna say, we need to get the CRA going.
I think that's
Taken.
an answer, maybe not the answer, but it's an answer to do the CRA.
Mhm.
Well, I think we should,
We need to
For-
look at every option we can.
for the
I think.
next M&P, I think we need to dive deeper in the CRA.
Okay.
Instead of just talking about what's this.
Mhm.
No, I agree, but I
Yep.
think that Times Square is the main.
Correct,
is-
yes.
is-
Right.
And whether they need to be separate issues, I don't know, but
Well, the other thing we can talk about is, do we have different, multiple CRAs?
that was discussions that were had. I think that makes the most
Yeah.
sense. And I have already talked to, well, majority of the county commissioners would be in favor of the discussion. They did suggest looking at what they did with Benita and their TIF, how
Yes.
they set it up as a little bit different.
Okay.
I don't know if that was
I'm
a
not familiar.
strong suggestion or if it was, but they did direct us to look at that. At least one of the commissioners did. And then I can't,
They've also recommended looking at what the city of Fort Myers did. And I reached out to Mayor Kevin Anderson, and he has
yes.
made available his town manager and staff for us to visit that as well.
Yeah, he's also given a plan. You can get the plan
Yes.
from him if you want it. I can't remember what the other one was. Oh, the other one was, at the meeting, I had brought up discussion about, having a conversation with one of the developers that's coming before us. I had an idea about our Times Square property or Town Hall property. But how can we, and I'm sure it's been done in the past, Judith, you probably would know more about this, where municipalities have a land that they own, that they could entice developers to come in to do a public-private partnership.
Yep.
To get some of the things that are important as far as retail that's affordable for the small businesses or the essential services. I'd like to have that added to a management agenda to discuss or bring forward some recommendations of what have been done in other areas and how the town could do it. We have a piece of property that we own that's significant size that we could potentially do something really good with, but it'd be nice to have a discussion about it if there's no
I
objection.
like it.
That's a good idea,
Mhm.
actually.
That's all I have.
I
Scott,
think
do you have
that's
anything?
particularly,
No,
just,
CRAs.
yeah, I was just gonna say that's particularly prescient, given the fact that the fire department has decided to take the frontage of their property, because originally that was gonna be, they were gonna
Correct.
sell that and have that be retail. And so that makes this concept even more
timing.
appropriate, yeah.
Well, with, I don't know if it's for sale or not, but the old Chapel by the Sea next to it, it could potentially be something that could work together.
It will be for sale.
Right. Okay, that's all I had. And you got something?
Yeah, when you're ready.
I'm done.
Okay, good. I think we received the legislative platform from the Florida League of Cities. I just got this morning, so I'll be distributing that. Also, the
That's not true. I gave it to you yesterday.
did you? But I just got it this
Oh, well,
morning. So sorry. I don't always open my mail.
I emailed
when you
it
send
to
them
all of
right
you.
away.
Well-
I try.
Then that's not going to look good on your next review, is it?
Thank you. So the Florida House has released the new appropriations project funding request form for the 25 legislative session. we'll be talking more about our legislative priorities and things like that going forward. So I'll get with you individually. We need to kind of probably have some meetings in the next couple of weeks to make sure we get everything prioritized and moving forward in that
There
direction.
were some comments yesterday in the Politico article. They have a Florida daily that they put out that the leadership in the legislature is going to be a lot stingier going forward, and we really need to prioritize versus put 20 projects in it.
Correct.
And we've been good at that.
Correct. We've been successful, but
Yeah.
our success might not bode well in the future but we'll work on that. That's it, Mayor.
We have to have that ready before the delegation meeting, I would assume. But when's the delegation meeting? I don't remember off the top of my head. But anyway, we should have that done sooner than later.
meeting, January what?
6th.
January 6th?
The luncheon you're talking?
No,
Oh.
where the delegation is down here and every
Oh, yeah.
municipality goes up
Oh.
before and it kind of lets you know what our priorities are. Essentially what he's talking about.
Yeah, they want it by Thursday, January 9th is what that request is.
Okay. So we've got some work to do in a short amount of time.
Really short amount of time, as usual.
Okay.
That's all, Mayor.
Nancy, you have anything?
No, sir.
Okay. John?
Move to adjourn.
Hey, well,
Oh, yep. Not yet.
can I? No. Withdraw that.
No.
There's been no
No.
second.
So, obviously the building has been per seven of you now. Again, as I told you, this proud owners of a 7-Eleven, former 7-Eleven convenience store property. So you can direct me on what to do if we want to open up our own Slurpee machines
I
or
was
what.
gonna say, was there one in there? Or?
We haven't got in yet because the key hasn't come, but we're going to get in there today and see. It's empty, but we'll be taking the building down. We'll be coming before you really soon about the parking lot, the things we're going to do there. So we're really moving forward as quickly as we can on that building to get relocated as soon as we can. So just a little update.
Can you give everybody's noticing the building as they drive by? Can you give a painting update? Is the second coat already been applied?
The majority of the second coat has been applied. I think they took a break today just because of the weather that's coming in later today, and the moisture that's in the air and a little bit of wind, but it seems to be pretty much completed with the trim work. Obviously the elevators are a big thing. We're working on the elevator. Contractor.
But the white trim has been painted as
It
well.
will be. If it's not, it will be. Yes, there's most of it has, but there will be white trim painted. But I think they took a little break today because of the weather.
But that's 2 coats as well for the white as well, the white trim.
I'm imagining so.
Yeah.
Yes. So that,
Okay.
because they painted over blue when they were spraying, so they have to come back. So it will be as many as it takes. Also. Furniture is being put together, all the final touch-ups on the second and third floor are being handled, and then we'll be working really diligently on subcontracting the first floor so we can get that finished.
And somebody asked me the other day, how many parking spots is on the existing?
On the
Town
existing
hall
is
property.
24, I believe is the number, 26,
What
and
do
we
we-
should add another 50 at least on the other.
That was the question.
We
So
are
50
going to have all of our proper parking.
So 50 additional.
Should
in
be at
addition
least
to the
at least
24.
50.
Yeah, okay, all right, thank you.
That's all. Sorry.
I will second John's motion.
Good.
Any objection? We are adjourned at 11:04.